yeah, strange phenomenon. It shouldn't have gone off, but it did. We have no idea why it did. But anyway, if it's okay with those of you who are still there or who want to continue with the discussion, I'll run for another, say, 20 minutes to half an hour, no more, and I'll pick up where it appears the last video left off. We were at the point where I was showing you the diagram, and the actively evil people up here have taken control of the institutions, global institutions there at the top: state, education, health, justice and law, etc., etc. And of course, the common sense understanding that all of these institutions of state are, number one, they're very well organized. Okay, all hierarchies and structures going from the lowest ranking newcomers up to the heads of the departments or the ministers or whatever it might be. They're also very well paid. They're also very well controlled. And bit by bit, no matter what good intentions they have when they come in at the ground level, people soon and very quickly get to understand, if you want to be promoted, you need to start copying the big boys. All right? And this is where the big lie comes in. And again, in this diagram, you can see that what I'm suggesting is that what's happened here is that over a period of time, the sociopaths, and the period of time we're talking about is basically from around the Second World War, although arguably, you know, we've had this sort of battle going on all through history in different locations. But since the Second World War, this has been happening on a global scale. Hence the ease of the term globalists now. The psychopaths and sociopaths now have come across. They've taken away, basically they've captured all of the apaths, the people who are unconcerned, don't want to know, maybe damaged souls, or exhausted from fighting the system, given up all hope. And essentially what we're left with is a small group of pretty well informed, concerned and disturbed empaths who want the world to be a better place. But as I've said in the title of this video, getting away with murder. Now, what was I referring to specifically? Well, what I'm going to do now, guys, I'm going to continue the rest of this, the closing section here now, with the story. And the story, believe it or not, for several years, I was going to the Irish newspapers and outlets and RTE and all the rest of it, trying to share this horrendous story of corruption in the guards in particular, and how the guards were basically acting as for hire bodyguards and thugs for anybody who was politically connected. It had nothing to do with right and wrong, justice, breaking the law, not breaking the law. If you happen to, let's say you're in a pub and you had a disagreement with somebody in the pub and their father happened to be, or their cousin or uncle was a superintendent or something of that nature, you know, 9 times out of 10, you need to expect that your life was going to get ruined, you know, until you got the message. Don't argue with the connected boyos, and that, I mean, this is straight out of the criminal gangs books, but this is how things have been operating. So I'm going to tell you just briefly a story, and I'd like you to, if you want to read the story, well, first of all, if you want to read it in German, the story was published in this magazine in 2017, Cicero magazine, and it took a journalist from outside of Ireland to come in and cover the story. And there you go. That's me as a soccer referee at the soccer pitch. Well, I wasn't dressed as a referee, of course, but this same story has been translated and amended a little bit in order to give the full picture. And the full story is in the book, The Criminality in the Irish Courts book, and the Absence of the Rule of Law, because it gives a bit of a background to how it has arisen that I have ended up producing a book, and here's the section in here. This is the German translation into English. About 12 pages in the middle of the book with photographs and everything. But how it is that I've come to have to produce a book that names 100 officials and office holders, going all the way to the Supreme Court, to the DPP's office, to the Garda Commissioner, several ministers of justice, other politicians, and you realise, yeah, this is a criminal organisation. It is a cabal. I mean, they shouldn't have anything to fear from an honest citizen or resident of this state going up to them with a complaint, because they tell us that they have all these procedures and structures in place to make sure that Ireland is governed by the rule of law and that individuals' rights are preserved and protected and everything. It's all a lie. It's a massive, horrendous lie, and it's been going on for decades. If you are very, very fortunate, and if you take a case into the courts that does not involve connected individuals, that doesn't threaten any arm or agency of the state, that doesn't threaten to embarrass someone who's connected, then you might actually get a just result in your case. But other than that, these are not courts in the way that we believe them to be. If they were to be honest, they would set themselves up and they'd say, you walk through that door, there's an entrance fee to get in and there's an exit fee to get out. And in between, we're going to squeeze as much as we possibly can out of you until you either wise up or go mad, or lose all your property. That's what's going on. So several years back, and again, I'm just going to run through this just as a little addendum, just in case it gets broken up again. I can't cover all the materials I wanted to today, and I don't want this to run on too long either. So I'll just tell you, for those that are interested, my name's Stephen Manning again. I'm a semi-retired teacher, and I'm the administrator for the Integrity Ireland Association. We're trying to help people who are victims of a thoroughly criminal, rogue, corrupt establishment over here, and we're doing what we can. So my personal difficulties here in Ireland started in way back in 2009. I was a soccer referee, and I had to chastise somebody on the sidelines for being abusive to the kids. It was just a little kids match, I think under 12 boys or something like that. And his response to me, he's one of these people that, and I won't name names, guys, just so that we don't get censored or anything. He at the time, he was about 60 years old, this guy, but he's what I would describe as a 60-year-old juvenile delinquent. You mention the word football and all sense goes out the window, and it becomes some sort of a rabid, foaming at the mouth, can't contain himself. So he was out of line, and I said, you can't use language like that. Don't you effing tell me what I can effing say and can't effing say on my effing football pitch. Right? So later on in the week, I happened to go in for a pint in the local pub. We're in a small area out in the wilderness in Achill, out in west of Ireland, and some words were exchanged. He'd had too much to drink, and I said to him, "Stop it, not in public. If we have a problem, to talk about it in private." Anyway, he stormed out of the pub all angry. So I wrote a letter into the soccer authorities and asked someone to discreetly contact him and advise him, because he wasn't going to hear it from me, but to advise him, look, the community is too small, we can't have a dispute of this nature in a small community like this, especially when I was refereeing most of the local team's games, because it was in an isolated area. The next thing I knew, a letter had gone in to the local soccer authorities alleging that I had entered the changing rooms where little girls were undressing. Now, I hope some people are, put off by this, and they think, oh my lord, But first of all, I'd say completely untrue. I was eventually, after 2 or 3 years in the courts, I was eventually exonerated. I got damages and everything but in the meantime, I had to hire a barrister and a lawyer to take defamation action against this individual in particular. The trouble is, when he started off, he said that it wasn't him that wrote the letter, it was the committee. And the committee was about 9 or 10 men and of course they had families in the community and everything. We wrote to them and we said, look, none of you need to be involved in this. If you didn't see the letter, if you didn't agree with the letter, if you didn't sign off on it, you don't need to be in the lawsuit, please. But it's a strange phenomenon in small communities like that. I was the newcomer. I'd only been there a couple of years. The guy I was having difficulties with had been there at that time, about 10 or 12 years, I think. No, 15 years, that's right. And he was considered a pillar of the community because he was the manager of the local soccer club. Anyway, to keep the story interesting, what suddenly happened was a campaign of intimidation, harassment, death threats, false online profiles, letters to the child protection authorities, anonymous letters, which they were obliged to act upon, even though they didn't know where the letters were coming from. We got put through investigations, formal investigations. We even had to turn up in court. It was horrible. We reported over 700 incidences to the guards during an 18-month period. And again, to try and keep it tight and keep everything succinct, it got to the point where we were living to a certain amount in fear of our lives. And there were 2 or 3 occasions where I honestly thought that men were on their way to come and either kill me or, damage us badly. So much so that I would call the guards and I'd say, I'm parking the Land Rover at the end of the road. If this vehicle turns up, I'm ramming him straight over into the ditch. And if you guys don't get here before then, that's what's going to happen. And the guards would never turn up. We would later find out that some of the guards were involved in the whole setup. It all came to a very disturbing head on Valentine's Day 2010, and this you can check out for yourselves on the internet, guys. If you put in the word Valentine's Day 2010 Achill attack, okay. Now the long and the short of it was that 2 men were hired, paramilitary types, were hired out of Dundalk, and were sent to break my legs. Unfortunately, the instructions they got, obviously they made a mistake. I can explain all this in more detail another time. But they went up the wrong road, went to the wrong house, and got the wrong guy. They gave him a token beating, and it was he himself who informed me when I went up to see him. I think the day after, 2 days later, maybe I went to see him just as a neighbour. Had no idea or thought for a minute that it was anything to do with me. And it was him who took me aside and he said, Stephen, you need to know this was intended for you. And then I started putting 2 and 2 together. I then got in touch with the guards. They told me, oh no, don't worry about it. We know what it's all about. But funnily enough, less than a month later, one of those men got murdered. Now, I'm saying it right here on video. I have sufficient evidence that nobody wants to see that deeply implicates some of the local guards in, number one, making sure that the 2 paramilitaries had a clear run in and out of Achill on the night in question, on Valentine's Day 2010. Number 2, that there is a deep suspicion that the men who committed the murder were either guards themselves or were operating on the instructions of the guards. And number 3, that all of our attempts to get evidence to the guards about the crime, and we had a substantial amount, even while they were putting articles in the newspaper saying, oh, we need to find out how this murder happened up in Dundalk, and please send us details and confidence. We did it. Called the hotline, sent them information, some of it in my own name, some of it anonymously, and all basically said was, come and talk to Stephen Manning, he's got some information that you need to know. They never came and spoke to me. Now you think about that now, that's 11 years ago, and I'm still harping on about it, okay? So when we started to put this book together, we mention some of the characters, and their pictures are in here, some of the people I've just spoken about. Their pictures and their names are in here, in this book. And there was another element, which was a woman in the UK, who I'll just describe here very loosely as a classic, definitely a sociopath, possibly a psychopath. She has spent her whole life ripping people off, using false identities, creating businesses that don't exist, writing letters from legal companies that don't exist, all this sort of stuff. She's just a career-long criminal. And how I stumbled across her was through a publishing arm. I won't go into the detail, it's not necessary to explain, other than to say that eventually myself and about 120 other people discovered that we were being ripped off by this woman in regards to book publishing projects. When we found out, we formed a group together, and 17 of us in the end took small claims actions in the UK courts against her. Now, this was between 2006 and 2009. I would then discover that in 2009, this woman was colluding with some of the people who were involved in setting up the paramilitaries to come and damage us, hurt us. So when I was thinking whether or not I should name her in this book, and I was thinking of doing it. But anyway, in 2018, a man in England, an ex-soldier in England, made several attempts to contact me, and eventually I returned the contact, and he basically filled me in with a bunch of information about this woman, including the fact that she had been away and got plastic surgery, that she had changed her name. I got all those details from him and asked him why he was giving me this information. And he then relayed a story to me that she had told him, which had no bearing on reality whatsoever, claiming that I had been down to her property in Cornwall and butchered her pets on the lawn, and just ridiculous stuff, you know. But on the basis and the back of this story, she had tried to get this soldier and a couple of his mates to also come over and deal with Manning. So she's a dangerous sort. So he's told me this 218, and I just thought, well, you know what, she's had plastic surgery, she changed her name, she's now posing as a photographer or something. Let sleeping dogs lie, you know, and let's focus on good things. What can we do? Yeah, positive things. So when I wrote the book, I did mention her in her previous name, and that, you'll see that in the back of the book. I say this was her name then, and if we have any trouble from her, we will print her new name. But he got in touch with me again in June last year. Now, please bear this in mind, guys. This is only June last year. This is after the COVID stuff has started and everything. June last year, and I'm checking with him that he's going to be all right with me printing her name in this book. And he says, yes, I'm 100% with you, Stephen. I'll back you up. He said, if it amounts to anything, if the English police want to follow up on this, he said, I'll give them a statement, and I admire your courage for what you're doing, Stephen, and all that. And I'm so sorry I didn't actually say something earlier and all that, whatever. Then he tells me she just paid a hitman £10,000 to have her ex-husband killed. Now, this was something to do with custody of the kids and an inheritance from the house or whatever, so I was told. I said, this is astonishing. How do you know this? He said, well, I know it, he said, because the silly woman gave the 10 grand to a mate of mine. And I've got his name as well. But this mate of his has no intention of doing anything. He's just taken the money and thought, stupid woman, she wants to give me the money, I'll take it. And of course, she can't go publicly asking for it back. So she asked this soldier guy, would he go and try and get the money back? And she would let him keep half of it, 5,000 of it for himself. So he's telling me this whole story. And I'm thinking, holy God, if this woman is willing to have her husband murdered for £10,000, she had just come into an inheritance from her mother's estate, apparently, and she had 300,000 or 400,000. So this was nothing to her. 10,000, going, you know. But it just showed the nature of the woman and how dangerous she was. And I thought, oh, Lord, right, here's not only an opportunity, but a necessity for me now to contact the British police. And I'll tie it in to the launch of the book and explain to them that the reason I'm contacting them is because I've been given credible, a credible story, or a statement that she had solicited someone to kill her husband for £10,000. Now, what makes this story even more interesting, guys, is I checked out the guy that this soldier said had taken the £10,000, and wouldn't you know it, he was arrested on suspicion of murder 2 years earlier. Okay, a different thing altogether. So the story's starting to knit together now, and it seems, and I've got that evidence. Trust me on this, I've got the evidence. So the first thing I did was I wrote to now just use the term carefully. It was a magistrate. A magistrate is a sort of a judge, right? But this particular magistrate, her role is sort of like an oversight role for a local police force. Again, I won't name names right now because I don't want this to be taken down. Because the message is the most important thing, that people understand who we are dealing with when we're dealing with the establishment and what's important to them and what's not. So I wrote to this magistrate thinking that she was the head of that particular local police setup. And I said, there's a soldier living in your jurisdiction has told me X, Y, and Z. The woman in question also lives in your jurisdiction now as well. The man he paid the 10 grand also lives there as well. In other words, this is going to be really easy for you to investigate this and sort this out. And her husband lives in, and I gave them the location where he lives. I didn't have his address, although I'd already written to him. I sent him a letter at the address I knew he had. Just said, I'm just giving you a warning that this has come to my attention. You need to know, in case you're in danger. And she wrote back to me, and this, believe it or not, this was the only communication out of, and I'm talking now maybe about 50 communications over the next few months over this matter with the English police and other parties, all the way up, believe it or not, to the Home Office in the UK. And Priti Patel, who I can mention because you'll know that she's the one in charge there at the moment. But she responded, because I said in the letter, I said, look, if I don't hear back from anybody in 3 days, I'm going straight to the press with this, because I believe our lives could be in danger, because this book has just been published. She's going to see her name in it, and who knows, she'll pay somebody else 10 grand to come over here or whatever. So the woman, the magistrate responded to me in shock and horror. She says, oh my lord, I'm very disturbed at your letter. Absolutely, I understand why you'd be concerned and you'd be worried and all this, blah, 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 blah. So all about it, but in England they have all these different police districts and they have a chief constable in it, and he basically controls it all. Then they have these oversight, sort of like an ombudsman oversight bodies, police oversight. So that's when the tomfoolery started, and it started with various inspectors and detective sergeants contacting me, and everything. Nobody wanted to know the details of the hitman. No one. And no matter how many times I asked, nobody would go and interview the witness who was sitting there in their own city. I gave them his address, phone number, his photograph, the whole lot. Said he's waiting to take a statement. So then I contacted the witness, the soldier, after about a week, and I was texting him saying, have the police been around yet? He said, no, but I did get assaulted by 3 unknown assailants the other day coming home. Really? Very interesting. Who were? I don't know. Now, luckily, this ex-soldier, knows how to handle himself, and apparently, dispatched them or got out of the situation, and it was home and safe. So I then used that material. I went back to the police and I said, right, while you've been dithering the last 2 weeks, this guy has been assaulted. Now, will someone please get out there and take a statement from him? They still wouldn't do it. And the amount of cover-ups and attempted and mess-ups that they made in this process. The next thing that happened then, I found out that, what they did, idiots, they accidentally sent me an internal email. They copied it back to me by accident, but I'd used a legal sort of legalistic-looking email address. They sent it back to me, and in it, there's one colleague talking to another saying, oh, here's the latest thing back from this Manning character. What are we going to do about it? Oh, I don't know, I'll meet you on, and then they've got like a Zoom situation that they meet. So they were going off to discuss it. Next thing I do, I get an email back from this inspector saying, I emailed him and I said, what are you going to do? Look, are you going to do this? Are you going to see? Oh, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, whatever it was he said, I knew he was lying to me now because I had this internal email. So then I just wrote back and I said, okay, Inspector, you've just lied to me. That's it, we're done. I don't deal with liars, not when you're a policeman as well. Okay. Secondly, I'm sending in a formal complaint to the Chief Constable under seal. You are not to open that letter. If you did, it would be a criminal offence. Now, I want confirmation that the Chief Constable knows about this case, what's going on and everything. Believe it or not, if you can believe this, guys, later on, after dealing with about 4 more different tiers of police in that particular location, and now I've made a complaint up to the Met Police and up to the Minister for Police up in the British Parliament about what's going on. And now we're 2 or 3 months now into this process, and they still haven't confirmed that they've gone to see this guy, or they don't want to know who the hitman is. And then I said, I said, okay, now the chief constable knows what's going on, doesn't he, and everything. Then they said, oh no, when Inspector so-and-so got your email, he placed himself under a complaint mechanism. I said, what? Yeah, so now they were trying to redirect me into a complaint mechanism about the fact that the inspector had lied to me, and they tried to tangle you all up in that process. And I kept saying to them, not interested in that. I want you to confirm that you've gone to speak to the witness. Now, in the meantime, I'm trying to contact the witness privately, and I can't get through to him all of a sudden. He's not answering Facebook. He's not putting any posts up on Facebook. He's not answering the texts or the phone calls that we sent to him. I wrote to him, said, please, you've got to let me know, because, Anyway, to this day, I still don't know what happened to the witness. All I've got is a policeman from the UK telling me that the witness said that it's okay for the policeman to tell me not to contact him anymore. That he wasn't assaulted. He knows nothing about any conspiracy, blah, blah, blah. This is just unbelievable, because I've got all the evidence. I've got many, many texts. I've got records of phone calls, not just records of them, recordings of them. There's too much detail involved. And 6 months later, all I get from the officers of Priti Patel, and this is after writing to 7 different MPs, some of whom are supposedly well known for standing up for the downtrodden and all the rest of it. And I've written to them all and said to them, look, I don't know what's going on here. You've got the whole of the system, not just in Ireland now, but also in the UK, trying to cover up, number one, a murder back in 2010 that was connected to a serious physical assault at the same time, and now possibly connected to a conspiracy to murder in your own jurisdiction in 2020. What's going on? And it appears, anyway, eventually the British police then referred me back to the Irish police, even though I told them that the reason I was directly contacting the British police was because the Irish police, time after time after time, had turned out to be, it's not incompetence, guys, it's literally cover-ups, criminal cover-ups. They're refusing to investigate anything that implicates colleagues, buddies, superiors, seniors. And so eventually I went back to Drew Harris, and I said, all right, Drew, the British Home Office has referred me back to you to investigate this matter, or at least those Irish aspects of this matter. So I get a notice from Garda headquarters. Your message, the matter has been sent to the Assistant Commissioner of the Northwest Region. Oh dear, I won't mention his name right now, but history with this guy going back several years. He was involved in one first original cover-up of these crimes. He was the senior officer in Castlebar at the time, and covered up the fact that there was no investigation going on. So anyway, I then write to him and I say, okay, when are you going to do this investigation? And they say, it has been passed to the chief superintendent in Castlebar. Now this was 4 months ago, 3 months ago. And, of course, I've written to them, and I'm getting no responses back. So one day I called, and I said, I want to speak to the chief superintendent. I won't say his name again, but wouldn't you know it? The chief superintendent apparently was suspended from duty in December 2019. And, of course, our Garda Commissioner and our Assistant Commissioner in North West Region are fully aware of this. So basically, they've sent my file for investigation to an officer who hasn't been at work since December 2019. Now, that's just the shortish version. How am I looking at? Yeah, that's about an extra half hour, guys. You mustn't think of this in context, oh, that's just Manning's story. It's not. Of course, the way that I go about things, the fact that I fight so hard, and the fact that I've educated myself about the law and everything, of course that adds layers of complexity onto the story. But the story, and I suppose the culmination would be this, was after I realised I was getting nowhere through the British establishment, I wrote a letter back to the first magistrate I first wrote to. And it was a sort of a reprimanding letter. And said to her, look, you knew all along because I've been copying you into all the letters and emails I've been sending, thinking that you were actually one of the good guys because you responded appropriately at the beginning. You were horrified at the story. But you now know that there's been a deliberate cover-up of this at several different levels and layers. And I'm asking you, please, to get back to me and explain to me what can be done now. The police in England are clearly lying. They're covering up. I believe they've intimidated the witness to such a point that he's scared to contact me now. You know, I've offered to the police and the guards to give them the evidence that the witness gave me anyway. You know, although I wouldn't. That's why I wrote to him. I said, I don't want you to get in any difficulties here. I don't want you to get in problems. You've been brave enough to come forwards with the story and everything, but you know, if you don't communicate with me, what am I left to think? You know, that you've either been injured or intimidated. I think he's literally too scared to come forwards now. But I've still got enough evidence in the texts and the emails and the recordings when we had conversations and connection. I've got it all, you know, so that's sufficient. We don't actually need him. That's the irony here. I don't need the soldier as a witness to establish what's happened. And because I know the name of the would-be hitman, of course the COVID thing has stopped us travelling, but I had intended to go and seek him out and find a way that we could resolve the matter without necessarily getting him in trouble for conning a woman out of 10 grand, you know, or whatever it was, you know. And meanwhile, as far as I know, the woman concerned hasn't even been interviewed. No? This is the woman who went off to Korea to get plastic surgery done, change her appearance, new passport, new name under deed poll, whole new identity created. Nobody wants to know. So when I wrote the letter to the magistrate, I asked her to respond within, I can't remember, a week, 10 days or something. When she didn't, and I told her I was going to do it, I said I'm going to release this now to the media. I released it to 150 UK newspapers and TV stations and radio stations. I got one response only from Channel 4 News advising me that I'd used the wrong email address. Nobody else came back to me at all. Now, you have to ask yourself, how could this possibly be? Because I know I come across as a reasonably sane, well-educated, sensible sort of guy. And all of the stuff I'm saying is absolutely 100% true. It can all be proven. There's facts and documents and everything to back it all up. Why, oh why, is nobody doing anything about this? Why wouldn't even a tabloid like the Daily Mirror or the Sun or something like that say, oh yeah, we could make this into a big shebang of a thing and have a go at the government at the same time? And it's too big because it undermines. They know now that Manning guy, you want to see the dirt he has on us. He's got this book that's 100. If you start talking about this thing, it'll eventually lead back to that book, to Pandora's box as we're calling it. No, they all want that book to be shut down. They've tried already to shut it down, being sold by Amazon and that. I don't know if I need to go back in there again and ask questions again of the big printers and distributors. I had to go to their legal teams and ask them what's happening. Why isn't the book, you know, being released to people when they're trying to buy it? But I suppose the conclusion of everything, and to sum it all up in context of the whole COVID narrative and everything that's going on, you've got to go back to this understanding here, guys. Yeah? This understanding of the cabal at the top there. The cabal being made up of a clique of very intelligent, very determined, and soulless individuals. I was going to say sinister, but in fact, it only appears sinister to an empath. If you're a sociopath or a psychopath, it doesn't appear sinister, it's just what you do. Whatever you have to do, you do it to get what you want. If that means deceiving, exploiting, and if they have decided, which I suggest might be the case, if they have decided for reasons that are going to be too complicated to go into right now, maybe another day, if they have decided that it's time to do away with the old monetary system, right? In other words, money as we know it today will have no value. Then you ask yourself, what would have value? Property will have value. That's what will have you. Property and things. Who owns and holds most of the property? Well, obviously the big multinational corporations and small and medium-sized businesses. Is it a great coincidence, one has to ask, that already 25% of the small and medium businesses in Ireland have gone bust. Ask any small and medium business owner, where are you at? They're stuck in this endless cycle where they cannot survive, not as long as these lockdowns continue. And then you have to ask the question, well, what's the lockdown based on? They go, oh, this pandemic thing. Yeah, well, what's that based on? Well, all those PCR tests. Oh, you mean the PCR tests that are 97% inaccurate? Yeah, that's one. Yeah, that's the one. That test for, and the 3% that are accurate are testing for a disease that has a survival rate of what? 98.8%? Oh, well, what about the normal flu? Oh, that's gone. Oh, what about the other coronavirus? Oh, they're all gone. What do you mean they're gone? Oh, yeah, well, basically what's happened is the coronavirus has replaced what we would have normally called the flu and cold season. And even if the coronavirus is something new and different and some sort of a mutant strain from what existed previously, the figures are actually almost identical. In fact, there's a couple of the years in the last 5 years where more people have died from respiratory illnesses than have done this year. And when you start putting all those facts together and you say, well, if that's the case, then why the push for all these vaccines, apart from the obvious one, that the big pharma and the big companies are making billions out of it, Yeah, but what other reason could there possibly be for the forced vaccination of the world's population? Which it looks like that's the way it's heading, And if you don't get to move. You're basically a prisoner in your own home at best. And that's even if the Trace Act they have in America doesn't give them permission to kick your door down and drag you out kicking and screaming and force you to get tested and vaccinated against your will, for the greater good, of course. Yeah. But there are different ways. Remember, going right back to the original part of the discussion, there are different ways of removing someone's soul. As I say, you can do it psychologically. You can brutalize people. You can alienate them. You can drive them into desperation. You can take away all hope from them. You can condition them. There's many ways of doing it. And that, believe it or not, is the world that the cabal, the psychopaths in the cabal want. That's the world they want. And we in our, over here, are the few empaths left that are well informed, well educated, trying to send the message out there so that we can capture as many decent people as possible. Because something has to give, guys. We're either heading into lives of tyranny and perdition, just like the serfs of old, the whole notion of a free-thinking, glorious human being. No. God, spirituality, truth, morality, all those notions of goodness will be replaced by the state. Okay? And I'll make a prediction now that, let's hope it doesn't happen, but in the event this continues to unfold the way it's going, you will see a scenario whereby multinational corporations, who are of course embedded with the political establishments now, they're in bed with them, multinational corporations and nation states will end up basically owning everything, and then they will give out, graciously and generously, they will give out crumbs to the people. We should never forget that governments are there to serve us, guys. They're there to serve us. Yeah. And much as I would hate to advocate any sort of there's a difference, of course, between action and violence. Let me just say, we need to get active, guys. We need to get active. And it starts up here. Learn, educate, and wise up. Like the Bible says, be gentle as doves, but wise as serpents. Another one is, don't cast your pearls before swine. And another one is, they are without excuse, because the evidence is all around them. Thanks for listening, guys, and hope to do another hour next week on a similar topic. Bye now.